Hi, my name is Kylie Lewis, and today for our reflection video 3, we will be covering the kind of problem a city is, remembering Jane Jacobs, Cities for People, and the Growth of the City, an Introduction to a Research Project by Jessica Garcia, Kylie Lewis, Jenna Grimm, and Grace Frederick. Hi, my name is Kylie Lewis, and I watched the video Remembering Jane Jacobs. So Jane Jacobs was an author and activist against modern urban planning, and she wrote many works in contradiction to the planners at the time. One of those being Robert Moses, which is one of the most respected urban planners during that time period. She moved to New York City at just 18 years old and began working as a secretary until she got a job at Architectural Forum and truly saw how cities worked. She saw that New York City was being turned into more of a community, which in reality was not better for the people. And after gathering all of the evidence that this didn't work, she wrote books that pulled all of these facts together and changed the world's view on cities. So her background, she was born in Pennsylvania, did not go to college, and moved straight to New York City at just 18 years old. And like I said, in the 1950s, she began working at for Architectural Forum, and this is where she truly began and saw how cities ran. And she rode her bike everywhere, just to make a point that connecting with the community is important. For my secondary source, I read an excerpt from Jane Jacobs, a pioneer urbanist and cyclist. Her main work that is mostly recognized now is The Death and Life of Great American Cities in 1961, which really exposed the failures of urban renewal approaches and argued for mixed-use communities where street life and pedestrian safety and urban surveillance was put first. She made her first public stand against Robert Moses about urban planning, which resonated her ideas with activists and ordinary citizens, setting the path for her activism in Greenwich Village. She set a foundation that would later influence movements like New Urbanism, and her advocacy reached a milestone in 1958 when the city closed Washington Square Park due to traffic, which became a very important symbol of her urban activism. Her ideas profoundly influenced modern urbanism and had much impact on New Urbanism movement, which promotes walkable neighborhood, mixed-use communities, which includes the street life and pedestrian safety that was mentioned earlier. And today, Toronto has established the Jane Jacobs Prize, where she had moved later on during World War II, or during the Vietnam War. And New York City established the Jane Jacobs Medal, celebrating those who make significant contributions to urban design.
Howdy, my name is Jenna Grimm, and I'm going to be doing slides 7 and 8, covering Cities for People. So basically the ideas that I gathered from the article is that basically the ideas from Jane Jacobs is like cities are organized complexity. So there's a lot going on, but it all flows together in some sort of way. It's made up of like people and ideas and all the things, and not just buildings and architecture and stuff like that. Betancourt sees the cities as complex, adaptive systems that kind of change and grow and, adapt to how people interact with them and live throughout them in a way. He studies cities using data and math to kind of find patterns in certain ways that they grow and function. Kind of meaning that large cities can be both more productive and more efficient, but they are unequal and super crowded. And Betancourt's goal is kind of to help planners and leaders use this data to understand how cities really work instead of just like guessing and kind of just winging it. And the overall message I gathered are that cities are not problems to fix. They're living systems, and we need to kind of understand that and grow together as one to live productively.
Hello, I'm Grace Frederick, and I'm going to be talking about The Growth of the City, Ernest Burgess's article or story. He was a sociologist who graduated from the University of Chicago and created the concentric zone model. He was the first to sort of see a city rather than just a location, but as a gradually changing place, studying the behavior and just changes that happen. So the concentric zone model divided the city into several rings that expanded outward from the downtown loop. So this being factories, low-income housing, immigration areas, beyond that working class neighborhoods, middle class neighborhoods, and finally the commuter suburbs. So he called this constant movement between these zones succession, which is very important. That is different social groups gradually replacing one another, much like the ecological cycles in nature. Another key idea was the mobility or the pulse of a community, meaning how migration, jobs, commuting reflects a city's overall health. Even today, traces of Burgess's model remain visible, how modern cities are organized from dense business centers to sprawling suburban rings, showing that his view of a city and living organisms still shapes how we understand urban life today. Okay, and then the secondary source I chose is by Samsung and Mornoff from 2006, where they take Burgess's early ideas and just the base level of the concentric zone model and converts it to modern data. So they use high resolution population and mapping tools to study neighborhoods, its forms, and just how they change, how they evolve, essentially tracking how people move, settle, and reshape the city over time. So of course these reflect Burgess's findings and them still happening in today's society. So neighborhoods are constantly evolving as new groups come in, others move out, just like Burgess described, but now researchers can measure the shifts with precision. So they found that neighborhoods are a dynamic ecosystem rather than fixed rings, which is a more complex and precise version of the social metabolism that Burgess discussed. So even though this model is almost a century old, this research proves that the concept of a city as living, changing organisms still helps us understand urban life today.